Those are the variations of how the advanced tier of the Face Reading Academy. Now, in today's lesson, we are going to talk about modifiers. Modifiers are special areas of face reading that actually modify or change the capacity and or intensity of a specific interpretation or reading on a person's face. Okay, so today's topic, primarily, we're going to talk about money, status, and power, and the specific areas that address money, status, and power is the nose, forehead, and cheekbones. So what we're going to do in this deep dive session, we're going to use the classical approach into studying the various formations or appearances of the nose, and we're going to study almost all the possible variances of the nose on a person's face and what it means. Now, once you understand how this, the basic components and the way the nose is structured and the way to interpret it, you can use that as a modifier to the entire reading of a person's face, okay? Because obviously, as you know, if I put this in layman's language, so money, the first thing is obviously to enjoy life. Then the second thing about money is you need some money, obviously, to pursue your dreams. So we may have a lot of dreams. You may be an intelligent person with loads of ideas. And in order to pursue these ideas and make your dream come true, you need to finance your dream. If you don't have the money or don't have the capacity to reach the funds that you need, a lot of dreams cannot come true. Okay, so that's why we need to look at money. And the third thing, I think with some money can help you at least reduce some problems in your life. Okay, so you think about it, a lot of the problems that we have, if it can be solved by money, then it's not a real problem. So that's why we need to study the nose, and by knowing that, it sort of modifies your reading for a person, because you understand that that person has access to finance or eventually could become financially free. And the other thing is about status. Status, we read it from the forehead. As you know, status represents recognition for your achievement, for the work that you have done, or you reach to a certain credibility or the ability to attract like-minded individuals or helpful people, right? Or your friends, the level of your friends is of higher ranking positions. All that represents your status, and you can actually read that through the different variances of a forehead. Okay, so we're going to deep dive on reading the forehead. And of course, lastly, power, the ability to make things happen. You see, it's one thing having an idea, and it's totally different in actually executing it, all right? If you can't execute whatever you have in your mind, or nobody listens to you, or you have a poor way of trying to get people to listen to you, or make your dreams come true, then you have no power. So apparently, the cheekbones represent everything about a person's ability to execute or harness power in their life. So let's get on to the details here, okay? So we can use these modifiers in terms of reading someone's career, reading someone's social status, reading someone's authority and or respect that someone might have and or ability to influence other people, and lastly, their wealth position. Okay, so we're gonna, and these four things sort of modifies the basic structure of the face. For example, you might have very poor face reading feature for eye. For example, let's just say for argument's sake, the eyes is one big, one small, for example, and or there's crisscross, and or is a three white eye, so there's some issues with the eye. But because you have very powerful nose and or you actually have a very powerful forehead and beautiful cheekbones, it sort of modifies that reading and allow the person to actually achieve success despite the negative components that come from the eye, all right? So that's why it's a modifier. Now, there are three parts of the face that can tell us about money, status, and power. The forehead tells us about status, your recognition, your intelligence capacity, the nose about wealth and wealth capacity, and the cheekbones about power. Because this is a long topic, what I'm going to do is separate this particular module into two parts so it's easier for you to digest, okay? So for this first part, I'm going to talk about foreheads. And then for the second part, which is the upcoming lesson, then we'll focus on the next two, which is the nose and the cheekbones. The forehead actually governs your parents' palace, as you remember from the previous module that we talked about the cosmic architecture. The forehead governs your parents' palace, it governs your career, it also includes your traveling and mobility palace. Remember the sky horse sector on the corner of your forehead? It also represents your analytical power and your wisdom and your ability to solve problems and ability to think. Okay, that's why it represents intelligence, and it represents whether someone would do well under pressure or examinations or their education. Of course, your entire forehead represents your status, your fame, and more importantly, if you want to look at whether someone will get promoted or not and how high that ranking would be, it's usually studied by looking at the forehead. And if you're looking at luck cycles, then the forehead governs between, as you remember, somewhere between 15 to 30 years old. But let's talk about the various types of forehead. Let's start with a good forehead, okay? The first one is called the smooth forehead. And what does it mean by a smooth forehead? A smooth forehead is one that has no wrinkles, no scars, no dents, okay? You're looking at something that, in the Chinese text, they have a very descriptive way of describing a smooth forehead, and that is, it looks like a pig's liver, okay? It looks like a pig's liver. So if a pig's liver is on the table, it looks rounded and smooth, and if your forehead looks like that, it's called a smooth forehead. No wrinkles, slightly rounded, shiny, and tall, okay? So once you have that, you're looking at someone who has supportive parents, definitely above average family background and or above average education level, okay? Likely to amass good fortune and or success at least by 30 years old, and or has really good interpersonal relationship. So this is a good forehead. It's like nice pig's liver, was what the description says. So it's rounded, there's no dents on the forehead. And here's another picture of it. This is slightly lower, but still considered a nice forehead with no dents, no scars, and all that. Now, this is a natural state. I'm sure if you put enough makeup, you can hide all the scars, but that doesn't count. Okay, I'm talking about your natural forehead. So here's another lady's forehead that's not too high, just enough, about 4 finger space for lady, about 5 finger space for a guy. Okay, 4 or 5 finger space is a good distance, even for a guy with 4 finger space, as you can put 4 finger nicely, with no dents, it's a good forehead, okay? Now I'm saying, I know you're saying, hey, as we get older, there's definitely going to be some wrinkles. Yes, that's after 30. Remember, your forehead, it governs from 15 to 30. So when you're below 30, you don't want to see any lines or dents on the forehead, okay? Any lines, the lines should be neat. That is after 30. What you mean by neat means not broken, straight lines. That's considered okay, but after 30. Before 30, even the straight lines are not considered good, okay? This time we're looking at something that is better than a smooth forehead. This is called the full and fleshy, meaning the forehead looks thicker. The forehead actually looks meatier as opposed to just a rounded forehead or a smooth forehead. Smooth meaning no dents, all right? A full, a fleshy one looks thicker, okay? For a lot of us who started face reading at first, there's no difference between the two, right? But as you look deeper, you might be able to see some differences here is that this is fleshier, as in meatier, as opposed to the bonier version, which is just the rounded version. So if you have this, you're looking at a person who's able to counter difficulties and thrive despite the difficulties. You're looking at someone who is spontaneously creative, considered very smart and intelligent. You're looking at someone who likes to do things in his or her own terms, and usually disciplined and able to achieve their goals quite easily with the support of other people because they know how to get the support in the first place, okay? So normally someone who has a full and fleshy forehead are considered great statesmen or at least good politicians. So here's a much fuller forehead as you compare this with the previous pictures. The previous one is just smooth. This one is more, meatier, as you can see. And here it is, another version of it, as you can see, much more meatier than the first one. And if you see the first one, it looks somewhat thin. This one, somewhat thicker. The next type of forehead is the opposite of the full and fleshy one. The full and fleshy, usually they work for other people. They thrive in a corporate environment. The sunken forehead is different. Let me show you. A sunken forehead is when you can see clearly there's a dent in the forehead, as you can see now. This is opposite of the full and fleshy. Now, again, In the old text, they call this a bad forehead. Let me show you another version. You can see from the front, there seems to be a dent somewhere in the forehead. And there's a protrusion somewhere, so it looks bumpy. Can you see that? So in the old days, foreheads like this is not good because success comes after 30 and you can't work for people, you will never get promoted. The reason why they don't get promoted is because the career palace is sunken. So they won't reach high-ranking positions. However, there's a way to overcome this. If you are working for yourself, you're self-employed, then you're already the CEO from the start. Therefore, you don't need to be promoted per se. That sort of indicates that people who are better off doing their own business usually are the ones with the dented forehead. And usually, their life becomes better after 30 or success comes after 30. Do you know why it's after 30? That's because the forehead governs from 15 to 30 years old. Okay, so here's another version of it. As you can see, it's rather bumpy. It's not like exactly rounded and full and or fleshy, okay? And a lot of entrepreneurs have foreheads like this because they drop out of school. If you have a nice forehead, you probably complete school, especially you might even get good grades in school. But foreheads like this rarely, get good grades, and or even if they complete university, they probably are not very good students in the first place, okay? However, it doesn't mean they won't succeed. It's just that their success usually comes after 30. Okay, the next style of forehead is called the high forehead. A high forehead is clearly 5-finger space. So you can fit 4 plus 1, okay? If you can fit 5-finger space, you're looking at someone who is highly intelligent, very high IQ. You're looking at someone who is great analytical ability, sometimes too good. That's why, they don't like, in old text, not now, okay? Old text says ladies with 5-finger space here is considered the mirror that shines on the husband, meaning she criticizes and looks at his fault all the time because she is so capable, and because she's so successful and capable, she tends to see the weakness of her husband. Basically, it means that she's more successful than husband. So, but today is a little bit different. Today's society, some men, of course, a lot of men do respect that if the wife is more capable and more successful. The only thing is, if he's timid or he feels threatened by the success of his wife, then there will be problems with the marriage for a lady with a high forehead, 5-finger space, okay? Anyone with a high forehead usually will achieve success in his or her chosen career because a high forehead normally indicates, high-ranking positions. Let me show you what a high forehead means, okay? So here, from this point, which is point 16, 15 is here all the way to the top, if you remember that clearly. So all the way here, it seems that there's so wide and tall space, so almost 5 fingers can fit in. Then you're looking at a really good forehead. And here is another example for a lady which is rounded. Usually ladies' foreheads are rounded, okay? Usually. Round is good. Round and tall. Can you see this is like really tall? That is considered a high forehead as well. So now, of course, there's 5-finger space that is high, and then there is overly high forehead, okay? Now, overly high forehead means it looks like it is more than even 5-finger space, okay? So visually it looks like this guy has a overly high forehead, right? The whole thing you can see is like looks like he's just looking at his head, right? And then this is another version, so the face is somewhat smaller and the forehead is somewhat big, right? So it looks, visually that's how you see it, okay? So here's another version for a lady. As you can see, the face is somewhat smaller and the forehead, it takes out almost more than 1/3 or more than 1/3 of the face. Now, anyone with an overly high forehead are ambitious or overly ambitious, overly analytical. Yes, they will achieve career success because they are ambitious, okay? But because they are overly analytical, it becomes problematic when it comes to their relationship. They are also too critical sometimes on their personal relationships or their partners, okay? And of course, people with extremely high foreheads like this get matured. They achieve maturity quite early in life. And so their partners who are not as matured in terms of thinking, then there will be a drift in terms of their relationship. So the setback of an overly high forehead is maturity difference between that person and the spouse, or a person who is overly analytical, and that causes problems in the relationship. But career-wise, most people with extreme high foreheads are successful anyway. Next is the low forehead, which is opposite of the high forehead. Low means 3-finger space and below, okay? So you're looking at something that is less than 3 finger space, then you're looking at someone who is extremely hands-on, someone that dislike too much intellectual discussions and or are impatient or temperamental or usually do not respond but react to situations. There's a big difference between responding. Responding requires thinking before acting. Reacting is basically whatever happens, they react to it, okay? If you're someone with low forehead, then basically they are quick in response, but not always the most intelligent response. But you're looking at someone who is usually very busy doing stuff, but may not be doing too important things all the time. Generally, people with lower forehead doesn't like to do too much analytical work, okay? They think fast, act quick, okay? That's what low forehead means. Now, I didn't say they're stupid because people will think, hey, high forehead means smart and low forehead means stupid, right? No. Low forehead are intuitive. So if the structure of the entire face is good, like good nose, good eyes, nice set of ears, for example, are present, you're looking at someone who is intuitively correct all the time, okay? They may not be great philosophers, but they definitely are quick thinkers. Whereas if they got poor setting ears, low setting ears, protruding ears, for example, or very thin nose or crooked nose, that modifies the whole reading into a negative reading, then you're looking at someone who is hands-on, can't think, and act rashly. Here are some examples of low forehead. You see that it's like 3 finger space from here to here. Here's another example of a clearly, evidently lower forehead, okay? So here's one more example on a lady's forehead. It's very, very low as well. Considered 3 finger space. And here's the last example. Again, you can see visually, okay? I know what you're going to do. You're going to measure every single person. No. You have to visualize. Remember, face reading, you have to sort of gauge. If you were to put 3 fingers, does it fit? All right. So if it looks relatively low, then it is considered a low forehead. Now, the next type of forehead is called an M-shaped forehead. The M-shaped forehead belongs to artistic people, okay? Those who are creatively inclined, those who are innovative, those who like to, work in artistic related fields, usually have an M forehead, okay? An M forehead appeals somehow, they have some form of charisma that appeals to the opposite sex. So one of the easiest things to remember about M forehead is they don't like to actually do detail-oriented work unless it's related to their art to be perfect. Otherwise, M forehead belongs to people who are usually the talent, not so much the operator, okay? So here is an example, right, of an M forehead, and here is another example of an M forehead. Now, some people may think, hey, does that mean that receding hairline is the thing? Well, if they recede is one thing, but you have to form the M in the first place. Because you're also receding here, then it doesn't form the M. And it has to stop to form the M on the forehead, okay? So a lot of M forehead people also, as long as they're in the artistic related field, like advertising, marketing, talking about holistic healing, which is an art as well, or doing singing or any entertainment sort of work, they're also in the artistic field and they can make good money, okay? Just remember, M stands for money, all right? So next is the beauty peak, which is a variation of the M forehead. The difference is there's a sharp point. Okay, now people with this are rebellious, not artistic, but rebellious and or usually very stubborn as well. And they usually can't get along with the father because that point is a fire element and it sort of attacks the element on the parents' palace. And usually, if it is the girl, there's a problem with the father, or if it's a guy, it might be a problem with the mother, or at least a problem with the parents. So M forehead. If it's a woman, usually this lady would marry a much older gentleman. When they say much older, in traditional Chinese text, it's basically 10 years, okay? But today, 10 years is nothing, yeah? And or those with the M forehead, be careful. They may make huge amounts of money before 30 and then lose it all shortly after. There might be one big problem between 28 to 30 years old because the beak here points towards the life palace. Now, this you may think this is an M forehead, right? This is not because of the sharp point, okay? Here is another example. Can you see? It looks like M, but it's not because of the sharp point, and the sharp point points to the life palace. Therefore, any success you make, by 30, you might lose it all, and then you have to start all over again, okay? And also something very interesting about the beauty peak here. The beauty peak type of forehead, the pointy, it's actually good for people in management and also good for people who manage talent. Whereas those with the M forehead is actually the talent, but not very good at management. That is the difference between the M and the difference between the pointy beauty peak hairline, okay? And the next type, which is the square forehead, means the forehead actually looks squarish, okay? As you can see, one glance and you look, wow, this line is straighter than a ruler, okay? So a straight line that runs across, we call that a squarish or earth forehead. Now, earth means reliable, earth means practical, a person who likes to do more action, speaks louder than words type. They are dependable because they're earth element, and the ability to manage accounting and finance, because you need someone dependable to manage accounting and finance. And now, the difference is, if this is on the forehead of a lady, then she will definitely be the one managing her husband. So normally a square forehead lady manages her husband, or is the one that wears the pants in the house, okay? Now, such a woman is practical, ambitious, and knows how to succeed, and usually has her future planned out way before even she reached 30 years old, okay? So those days, in ancient days, don't like a woman like this, because they say, how can we let the woman be the boss? But today is different. Today is equal amongst two genders. Therefore, if your lady has this, it's considered well respected, because she will achieve success in her own right. And the next type of forehead that is very different than the square forehead is the not square forehead, which is called the saw line forehead. A saw line is a zigzag, okay? It's like in, out, in, out, in, out on the corner of the forehead. Can you see that? In, out, in, out, in, out. So this type of forehead, here's another example of it, and you can see is in, out, okay? It doesn't look, it's not a straight line. It is wavy, in fact. Now, when you see an uneven hairline like this, it's considered the saw line forehead, like the edge of a saw. Okay, so this type of forehead is usually not good for the parents' palace. So it sort of counters, you see all these sharp corners counters the parents' palace, and also it affects the traveling palace. So people with this type of forehead usually indicated before 30, they might have to travel far to work on their own. So for a guy leaving the hometown to work, it's still considered quite normal. But if it's for a lady with a forehead like that, that means maybe on an early age, she has a separation from the father or the parent. They always say it's the father, but usually today we read it's from either one of the parent. That's why in the Chinese text it says, Wang mo ngak kok sun, fu mo zhou ba chun. That means if there is a type of twirl or zigzag on the forehead on a person, that means the parents are not present. So 走不全 means one of the parents might have died early or separated early, okay? So it may not be that drastic, right? Today, it may also mean people with a forehead like that are adopted children, right? Or maybe they have separated from their hometown family at a very young age. Why young? Because forehead represents 15 to 30 years old. Next, it's the protruding forehead, right? Now, the protruding forehead looks like this. It actually protrudes outwards, right? So if you look on the front, it looks like this part protrudes. And if you look on the side, it actually is rounded, okay? It looks like there's a light bulb in there pointing outwards. So this is called a protruding forehead. Now, a protruding forehead belongs to someone who is very well-mannered, has foresight of his or her own future. It's an over-analyzer because the analytical part of the forehead is dominant, okay? But because of that, it becomes indecisive and unrealistic. People with this type of forehead, they are over-analyzing everything that in life, and therefore it becomes indecisive and unrealistic when making decisions. They are very good at calculating and helping other people look at all the loopholes and the gaps and where the financial issues are, or collecting data or analyzing data, but they're not so good at making their own personal choices because can't decide. All right, so here is an example of a lady with a protruding forehead. Okay, so you can see it from an actual view. Okay, now opposite of this is the receding forehead. So this is the forehead that recedes backwards. Let me show you. So instead of protruding outwards, it goes inwards. Let me show you another example here. So you see this, you can see slopes backwards here. Okay, so here is another example of a face that has a receding forehead. Not so obvious sometimes, right? You gotta look from the side and then you can see it. Here's another example. It actually goes backwards. Now, people with receding forehead has good memory and good mental reaction. So they sort of react very quick. They are alert. They're sharp. They're witty, and but they're hasty. They're quick thinkers. Sometimes too hasty. They think too fast, and they are impatient. People with a receding forehead are generally impatient. is people with a protruding forehead are very patient. They're not patient, they just overanalyze stuff, okay? So people who have forehead like this start working very early in life. So even before graduating, they probably already start working. People with a protruding forehead will definitely finish their studies first, and they want to study everything so that they want to get everything in order before they start doing anything in life. Okay, now let me tell you something here before we continue on with more different types of foreheads. The thing is, most people think that they can only have one of this, right? Listen, you can have a protruding forehead yet with a sore hairline. You can have a protruding forehead with a square headline. You can have a protruding forehead with a dented or sunken middle career palace. Basically, it means you can have multiple things at once. What you do is you add the two pieces of information together to form a reading. That's why this is called the advanced tier. You got to do some thinking. You got to add in 2 or 3 together to form a reading. You can have a broad forehead yet protruding, correct? You can have a broad forehead yet receding. So you see what I mean? There are 2 different readings that you add together to form one big picture. Okay? Now, the other one is called a flat forehead. Now, can you be flat yet tall? Yes. Can you be flat yet low? So you add low forehead info to a flat forehead info. So you add it together, you form 2 readings. You can have a high forehead yet flat, correct? You can have a low yet flat. You cannot have protruding and flat though, because obviously you can't protrude and be flat at the same time, okay? So what does a flat forehead mean? A flat forehead is basically a logical and linear thinker, okay? So basically quite balanced, not too fast, not too slow. And looking at people who can't process quick information, and anything that is haphazardly presented to them, they can't take it. Haphazard is good for receding. Haphazard is not good for flat. Flat is linear. You got to tell it to them in a step-by-step methodical manner and they can get it. The moment you tell them bits and pieces here and there, it's not so good for the flat forehead, okay? And flat forehead don't like to be forced to make quick decisions. It's almost similar to a protruding forehead, but a protruding forehead can make fast decisions if you give them all the facts first. Flat forehead, even if you have all the facts, you can't do it if you don't present it to them in a methodical manner, okay? And but the good thing about flat forehead is they can retain information and knowledge quite well, as opposed to someone who is overly analytical or someone who is a quick thinker, okay, like a receding forehead. So here are examples of a flat forehead. So you see it's totally flat, okay? Here's another example, and you see it's flat. Previously there's receding, this is called a flat forehead. And the next type of forehead is called the broad foreheads. Okay, now what does it mean by broad forehead? A broad forehead is measured from this corner all the way to this corner, and it has and usually you can recognize it by this way. You can see a far distance between eyebrows and the hairline. It's like a really far distance, like almost like a 3-finger space between the eyebrows and the hairline. So this is called broad. This is broad forehead. You see, if this side grows, watch. If this hairline grows inwards like this, then you have narrow. If hairline goes like this, this is called broad. Okay, broad forehead. Now the broad forehead, it usually belongs to people with high IQ. Okay, tall is analytical, able to analyze complex information. Broad is IQ. Okay, broad is IQ. So if you have tall and broad, you're looking at someone who can become great entrepreneurs or at least a very high-position corporate leader. And the person will always have a lot of mentors in life. Why we say that? Because if you are broad, you will have great parents' palace. You have very powerful travel and mobility palace. Okay, because of that, both represents going outside to meet mentors and teachers, and you have great superiors. Therefore, your whole life is surrounded by helpful people. Okay, so usually people like this will end up being very well respected and have high social status. So here's another example of broad. Okay, this one is broad. And here's another example for a lady which is broad. There's space between the eyebrows. Okay, this is broad. Now you can be broad and low, broad and high, broad and M, broad but wavy. So it depends. You can add 2 pieces of information together. Now here's an adding of 2 pieces of information together. This is a broad forehead with a low hairline. Okay, so here you can see broad but low. All right, broad but low. Okay, visually you can see that. A broad forehead has as you know, it means very high IQ. The only difference is because it's lower, that means your career palace is lower, so normally people like this probably don't work for other people or don't work so well in a structured organization. So they're probably better off doing their own business as a self-employed with high IQ. They are able to get great business prospects as a business owner as opposed to someone who's trying to work their way up because they can't go really high because they're only like 3 finger space in their career palace, so it's not very high status. Here is another example of a broad but not high forehead. And the next type of forehead is called the high, pointy but narrow forehead. So again, now we're moving towards what we call a combination reading of the forehead. So let's see, a high forehead. Pointy means it somewhat looks like a cone. That's called pointy forehead. I mean, you won't get an actual triangle, okay? If your forehead looks like a triangle, you need to go and see a doctor, yeah? Because there's something wrong with you. What happens here is it looks like a cone. It looks like, some form of a narrow forehead, as you can see. That is called a high and pointy forehead, okay? So here is another example of a high and pointy forehead, as you can see. High, pointy, all right? And of course, here's another variation of a high and pointy forehead. Someone with a high, narrow, pointy forehead usually are pessimistic, okay? They are very suspicious, fire element, very suspicious of other people. Because of that, they're indecisive, don't know who to trust, and they can be mentally or maybe even physically weak. And usually, because there's a fire element, they are temperamental as well. Now, next is, it's part of the forehead, but it's not exactly the entire forehead. We're talking about the area just above the eyes. We call it the brow ridge, okay? A brow ridge that is protruding or visibly seen, it's a sign of a strong character. We're looking at someone who prefers, a proven track record, a proven way to achieving success, okay? They can take hardship because the eyebrows represent strong character. You're looking at somebody who is perceived as being stern because he or she is disciplined and rigid and inflexible and unyielding when it comes to wanting to achieve his or her own goal. Basically, the character is stronger, and because of that, they are able to get what they want in life through sheer determination and willpower. Okay, let me show you this. This is the area I'm talking about. As you can see, this is like dominant on a person's face, okay? Now, this is not considered bony because it is wrapped with very nice fleshy, someone has a certain elegance to it. So it's actually a very good brow ridge. Here is another example you could see. It's like almost there, you can see. It's not like it is bony at all. It's covered with nice fleshy, forehead. So this is someone who has strong character and has determination to succeed and usually will because of that. Basically, you're looking at someone who doesn't have very strong character, in fact, sometimes too flexible, sometimes even nimble, or someone that tends to resort to technical stuff instead of, having the gung-ho and I can do it attitude. They'll say, no, technically, they'll look at the way something is done or technical aspect of things instead of stepping forward. You're looking at someone who is generally unmotivated. Not that they're pessimistic. They are not so motivated or so easily respond to, general consensus or public motivation or encouragement, okay? Because without brow ridge, someone lacks that drive, okay? So here's someone that, you see, totally zero on their brow ridge. And here is another example. You can see, this part is not protruding and it's like empty. The whole forehead is this part and it's absence of that ridge, okay? So it may take some time for you to take note of this. Over time, you see it, someone with or without the brow ridge. Now, usually on a lady's face, the brow ridge doesn't need to be too thick. If it's too thick, then she will have an overly dominating, strong career, not so feminine and gentle, okay? Therefore, ladies, slightly, it's good enough, okay? If a guy doesn't have the brow ridge at all, then that person might be a little bit more yin in nature or a bit more feminine or more adaptable. And if it's absence, like zero, then the person might be a little bit wishy-washy when it comes to decision making. Next is similar to a brow ridge. We are only talking about the section where the life palace is and it looks like that part is bulging. You're looking at a fleshy or a fatty lump right in the middle of the life palace. That means point 28. This is someone who has very strong willpower, someone who has even stronger vision of himself or herself and has the determination and the perseverance to go through all hardship to get it. Because life palace that is broad and fleshy usually denotes success, okay, despite hardship. This in the Chinese text is known as Kam Seng Guat, the golden city bone, okay. So basically when you see that, or the golden dragon bone, the moment you have that, you're looking at someone who will achieve success despite the odds, okay? So this part here that is fleshy, right, is almost protruding. Now this one is just open space, but not exactly protruding. This one, on the other hand, is protruding. Can you see the difference between the two? Okay, can you see this protruding? All right, not protruding as in bony, protruding as in being fleshy. It's like there's a lump of flesh right here. The brows, and then something in the middle. Okay, I want you to see the comparison between the two. Okay, here is an example that does not exist. Can you see it flats in? It goes in, therefore it doesn't exist. And then here is someone that has something protruding. You see, you look from the side, you see, hey, there's a meat, a flesh that appears at the front. Okay, so this doesn't have any. This one, something in the front. Okay, it's like a flesh in front of the life palace. So this is a good feature. And the next type of forehead is called the horn forehead. Now, of course, we're not talking about a real horn on the forehead. We're talking about, someone who looks like there's two little round balls in the front of the forehead. So this is called the corner of the sun and moon, if you remember. Point number 17 and 18 on a person's forehead. The sun and moon points that are slightly bulging will cause to have some sort of a horn on the forehead. So we are looking at someone who is very successful since young because there are a lot of mentors who help this person and become famous in the young age as well. Or a person might achieve sudden fame, very intelligent because it's taught by good mentors and teachers, or someone who's very sharp and witty and is able to become quite a public figure. Usually have two nice corners, okay, like this, okay? There's two corners. So a person who can achieve certain fame in a young age. So these are people who are famous for their thoughts or thought leader or a leader of an industry. Now, today people can become influencers, all right? So that's also considered some form of fame and or famous for his or her type of work. Now, the horn forehead, unfortunately, it's not good for relationships. It's good for publicity, public name, but on a personal level, because it's an imbalanced forehead, on a personal level, in terms of relationship, is usually imbalanced as well. So normally the setback will be in terms of their personal lives. And lastly, we have the forehead of cleverness. Basically, the forehead of cleverness, it means that a person has a very broad, spacious, unobstructed career palace. And that is from point 16, 19, 22, 25, 28, one straight line, almost like this. Okay, it's slightly even protruding, nice and fleshy, unobstructed. Okay, like this, you can see it's a very nice space in terms of the career palace. It's called a forehead of cleverness, 聪明啦. So in this feature, obviously you're looking at someone who is very successful in terms of his or her career, can become a good minister or someone at a leadership position, or someone who's extremely knowledgeable or proficient in his or her own skill set. Very good learning capabilities, learn most subjects quite easily. You're looking at someone who generally have good academic results and achieve success without too many major catastrophe in terms of his or her career. So this is called the forehead of cleverness. So there you go. Those are the variations of how a forehead can appear on a person's face. Remember, as an advanced tier student, you need to be able to combine certain features together to form a reading. A forehead can be low, yet protruding, low yet receding. It can be several aspects together to form a specific reading. You just have to add the two or three sometimes together to form a reading. Now, make sure you recap the forehead topic before moving on to the part 2, where we will discuss the nose and the cheekbones. And when you're ready, I'll see you in part 2 of this lesson.